We here at the Sports History Network proudly partner with 26 podcasts, all revolving around the history of sports. But did you know that many of our hosts were sports history authors way before they started their shows? It's true. We've got Joe Ziemba, host of When Football Was Football, Joe Zagurski, host of Pro Football in the 1970s, Mark Morthier, host of Yesterday's Sports, Tommy Phillips, host of Lombardi Memories, and Scott Adamson, co-host of From the 55-Yard Line. All these authors have many books for you to choose from. To check them out, go to our website at sportshistorynetwork.com/sportshistorybooks. Pick up your copy today. Soundtrack provided by Kevin MacLeod of filmmusic.io.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello and welcome to the Sports History Network Showcase, our in-house show featuring SHN podcasters talking sports, talking history, and talking sports history. My name is Oz Davis, host of the Sports History Network's Truly the Goats podcast. And on this episode of the Showcase, we have Frank Redding, who has just joined the Sports History Network with his podcast, Ringside with Redding, Boxing History from Yesteryear. Frank, how's it going today?
Greetings from the Garden State, everyone.
All right. And how is the situation in New Jersey these days? How insane are people there?
I haven't been to any other states other than Pennsylvania, so I really couldn't tell you. I mean, I wonder how's it out in California and the Golden State out there?
Well, the weather is crazy, but the people are pretty mellow. So
okay.
I've always liked that about the Southwest. I'm a Northeastern boy myself, but I've always enjoyed how in the Southwest people are just way more relaxed. It's not like the Northeast at all. When I first came out here, people would tell me, slow down, man, slow down. I thought I was just speaking normally, but hey. Okay, Frank, how far back does your fandom with boxing go? And where does it take you?
The early, I started becoming a big boxing fan in the early 80s, maybe around my first podcast I did was the year of 1983, because that's when I really started becoming a super interested mega fan at that time. Then my fandom really accelerated over the next 10 years. Me and a partner of mine trained a couple Golden Glove boxers, so we had some involvement in the amateurs there for a little while.
Did you run a club?
No, we had a place out of my friend's back of his room and his bar, and we used to just take guys out to spar and to the gym. So we never really belonged to one personal gym. We had our own training headquarters.
Did you ever box yourself on any level?
Oh, I tried it. I trained and worked out and sparred a couple times. I realized I didn't have it. So I say, you know what, I'm going to focus my interests on other things in this.
What were your favorites from that 80s and 90s?
Oh man, well, Muhammad Ali goes back before that to the 70s. Okay, I mean, he was more than just a boxer. He was like a international hero to everyone. Okay, well, Ray Mancini, Marvin Hagler, they were the guys in the early 80s. Julio Cesar Chavez come along in the middle of the late 80s. Oh yeah, boxing was fully loaded in those days with the pay-per-views and the closed circuit TV. The first fight I ever seen on closed circuit TV was Hagler Leonard, April 6th, 87. Right. Yeah, at the War Memorial I seen it.
All right, let me ask you this, because it's a pretty obvious question, but I think that more and more of our listeners weren't around at the time. But how big was Mike Tyson for the image of boxing?
Oh yeah, he was pretty huge, no doubt. I mean, it's the baddest man on the planet, as he used to say. So you know what? He's 29 days younger than I am, actually. So him and I are around the same age, and he was a force to be reckoned with on the way up. He was barreling people down He was a wrecking machine on a mission of destruction.
He was, yeah. I remember you talked about pay-per-view. I remember the pay-per-view fights that he used to have, which would go about 73 seconds. And then everybody's wondering, where the hell did my $59 go?
Yeah, right.
And it was awesome because, you know, he would literally floor these guys with one punch. And the loser purse would be in the $10-12 million area. I mean, this is when Donald Trump was hosting fights in New Jersey, right? In Atlantic City.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Well, the Tyson Spinks fight, June 27th, 88.
Right.
That was one of the big fights of the decade. It's too bad it only lasted 91 seconds.
Yeah, exactly. And the question then becomes, it's like, okay, would you take one punch from Mike Tyson for $12 million? Because that's what those guys were doing. It's like, okay, I'll give it a shot. That might be worth it.
You know what, Oz? The guys that were going the distance with him, like, Mitch Green, James Tillis, Tony Tucker, I mean, they were in what you would call, I would say, survival mode. They just wanted to get through the fight standing upright at the end. They didn't want to be laying erect on the canvas like most of his opponents.
How about it? All right. Let's talk about your podcast and podcasting in general. Now, you said a little bit earlier that you first got into podcasting in '83. How's that possible?
No, not podcasts. I got to be a boxing fan in '83.
All right.
Yeah, podcasts. And this is brand new to me when I started this in August. I'm a newbie. I'm probably the newest member of this network. Well, one of the newest. The wrestling guy's newer than me, but so I'm a rookie at this stuff.
Really? Okay. So how'd you get into it?
Well, it's interesting. The wrestling guy, okay, that just started, he's the one that talked me into doing this. And then I turned around and I got him in here. So it worked together. In fact, he's the one that came up with the name Ringside but Reading. He's the one that thought that up. I came up with the last 4, boxing history from yesteryear.
Why the Lindbergh thing and the JFK thing?
Well, the Lindbergh thing's right in my backyard. It's about maybe 10 or 15 miles away from me, okay? And I got a friend of mine in Illinois. Me and him start becoming friends in the early to mid-'90s, and he started telling me stuff about it. And I says, you know what? This is right in my neighborhood. I'm going to start digging into this a little bit. And then I got hooked. I've been through the house 4 times. It's a fascinating case. I mean, it's 30 years older than the Kennedy assassination, but it's probably Charles Lindbergh was an international hero, you know.
At the Sports History Network, we're all about sports yesteryear, and so we're so pleased to introduce you to Row One, an online memorabilia gallery and shop that brings your sports history to life anywhere. The Row One gallery includes over 5,200 gorgeously reproduced prints of team posters, game program covers, game tickets, advertisements, and more in baseball, pro and college football, pro and college basketball, and more. And any gallery item may be printed in a variety of sizes on wood, metal, canvas, acrylic, or poster paper. And in Row One shop, check out the thousands more of unique items with a retro and historical designs dating back to 1876, including t-shirts, long sleeve shirts, phone cases, mugs, blankets, pillows, towels, and even shower curtains. Go to sportshistorynetwork.com, ROW1, for access to the full Row One catalog and for gallery prints and gift items. Plus, get a 15% discount off all prints on the Row One Pictorium Gallery with coupon code SHN15. Follow the link on the show notes.
I'd like to take a minute to tell you about quite possibly the greatest website of all time, newspapers.com. If you're listening to this podcast or any of them at the Sports History Network, you're probably into sports history. And you probably also know that for learning about anything prior to, say, 1990 online, the typical search engines like are nearly completely useless. But then there's newspapers.com. Newspapers.com gives you access to over 640 million pages worth of news from North America, Britain, Ireland, and more, dating from 1798 to last week. Do up a search for Super Bowl I, the 36th Berlin Olympics, Wayne Gretzky's first game, whatever. Newspapers.com takes you there with historical flavor that search engines like just don't give you. And now, get a free 1-week subscription to Newspapers.com by visiting sportshistorynetwork.com/newspapers. With a paid subscription, you'll also be helping to support the production of this podcast and other Sports History Network shows. That's sportshistorynetwork.com/newspapers. Newspapers.com. Way better for searches than you know what I'm talking about.
I would like to announce the podcast show Ringside with Redding, Boxing History from Yesteryear, brought to you by the Sports History Network. I am your host, Frank Redding, from the Garden State of New Jersey. I am a middle-aged boxing mega fan from the 1980s and 90s. I have no affiliation or allegiance with any boxing organization, federation, or alliance. I have a background in research and public speaking, boxing training, and coaching. I hope you will enjoy the factual information provided on this program. My goal is to educate and inform the listener on the history of the ultimate one-on-one sport, the sweet science. It will air bi-weekly on Saturdays and be available on the Sports History Network.
Nice. Okay, so as of this recording, we've done 7 episodes. Can you explain to the listeners, please, what is the concept behind Ringside with Redding?
Well, like I say, it's to educate and inform the listeners about the history of the sweet science, the sport of boxing, one-on-one, mano-a-mano, one of the toughest sports known to mankind.
Now, you're obviously, from listening to the podcast, extremely knowledgeable about the history of the sport. Since doing this podcast, has anything that you maybe relearned surprised you?
You know what? You're never too old to learn something new, right? So I'm open, I'm open-minded. I'll listen, and you know what? You can always learn something. You can never know everything.
All right. Well, we'll get you out of here pretty quickly here. I just wanted to ask you too, can you give us a teaser of an upcoming episode of Ringside with Redding?
Oh yeah, well the one I just sent away, which isn't up yet, is a boxer versus wrestler fights that have happened over the years. So I got so many titles dancing around in my head. I'm a professional public speaker. I did a lot of stuff on the Lindbergh kidnapping, the Kennedy assassination, Watergate. And I was just telling Arnie, I find this easier. You know why? I got a script. I'm not in front of anybody. When I do that, it's all memorized and rehearsed in advance. So that's a little bit more difficult. And, there's a lot of people that are very intimidated by speaking in front of crowds. So I find this to be a little easier than that. I got a script I'm reading off of. I was looking at this episode here, episode 6 of your podcast, the first 5 Rocky movies. Yeah. Why not 6 would be my first question, which was Rocky Balboa. Yeah, I just wanted to concentrate on the first 5. Okay. That's all. Just from a movie fan perspective, we do the sports movie podcast here on Sports History Network as well, called Game Film. Have you seen the Creed movies? You know what? I saw the first one, but I didn't see the second one. What'd you think of that? Yeah, I liked them. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I see. In fact, I see. You know what, Oz? I seen the first one on Christmas Day of 2015. Right. I think it just came out right before that. Maybe even that day, possibly. Yeah, I saw the second one not too long ago, just a couple of months ago. It's worth watching. The boxing stuff looks really good. I don't know how you feel. Well, of course, Ivan Drago is in it, and that's the big draw to it. So, but it's pretty interesting the way they did his story. I know that you enjoyed Rocky IV, so you probably like Creed too. Now, Frank, before the show, I asked you about contemporary boxing, but you say you don't follow it so much anymore. Why not? I just lost interest over the years. It's not the way it used to be. You know what I mean? It's, well, these pay-per-views are ridiculously expensive anymore. Going back when I was a fan back in the early 90s, when I was getting these different pay-per-views, and they used to have this company called TVKO, it was called, and they were putting on fights for $19.99, and they would be on maybe every other week, every 3 weeks, and the undercards were as good as the main event, and some of them.
Yeah, that's one advantage that boxing seems to have over a lot of other sports, is that these replays really have a lot of value.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good to see the old fighters, as opposed to, they're talking about closing down ESPN Classic again, which mostly shows like old basketball games, old baseball games, you get the occasional football game, but boxing really holds up a lot better than some of these other sports, I think. Okay, just one last question. In general, what is your favorite weight class to watch?
I like the lighter weights way better than the heavy weights. To me, they're a lot more well-rounded, more skilled. They bring a lot more fundamentals and tools to the game. Okay, now not mocking the heavyweights, okay, but the lighter weights to me are a lot more action fights. I mean, but the heavyweight division throughout history, people and even boxing fans, maybe that are sporting fans, will watch a heavyweight fight, but the lighter weights don't get a lot of notoriety. But I think overall, generally speaking, I think the lighter weights are a lot more skilled.
Interesting take. All right, let me ask you this. Can you tell me why? Because it seems to me that, when I was a kid, I'm a little bit older than you are, I think. But when I was a kid, boxing had a lot more cachet than it does nowadays. It doesn't seem to be nearly as popular or influential on sports as it used to be. What happened?
Well, I think, don't forget that the UFC came along, the mixed martial arts, and November 12th, 1993 was the first UFC. So that kind of stole some of boxing's thunder. And a lot of people look at that and say, gee, these boxers are one-dimensional. I want to learn this other stuff so I can know every aspect of fighting. Okay, but I tell people this and they think I'm out of my mind saying this. I actually think in long term, I believe that boxing is more dangerous. And I'll explain to you why, okay? Because you got a 3-foot target you're punching at. And the UFC and mixed martial arts, you don't have to punch a guy's lights out to win. You could submit a guy, you could arm lock him, leg lock him, choke him out. You don't have to beat a guy in the submission in that, because you have a lot of other things you could do.
Good point. Well, there you go, Frank. You just proved the adage that you quoted. I just learned something.
Yeah, the UFC is really taken off. Okay, but you remember, with the UFC, I used to be a big fan of that in the early days of it. But see, with that, they had to turn that into a sport, because they were in the early days of that, they were sanctioned. They were having the UFCs in places that didn't have a boxing commission, because in the early days of that, Atlantic City, New Jersey wouldn't touch that. Okay, so they had to start some judges and restarts, and they had to add some rules to it. Otherwise, that would have been a bit. Remember the guy that ran for president years ago, Senator McCain? He was a real strict. He was a real big critic of the UFC. Okay, so that's what they had to do. They had to turn it into a sport, or otherwise it would have went underground.
Wow. Yeah, interesting. Are you into MMA? Do you like it?
In the early days I used to follow it, but no, I kind of faded away from most of even football. I don't really follow that closely anymore.
The other thing too that the MMA really benefits from is that they have the UFC. Like you said, it's one league.
Right.
It's one league. And that helps, because that one league can, guess what, sell the contract to ESPN.
Sure.
I was speaking with a boxing podcaster about a year ago from England, and he's like, what's happening in boxing in the States? I'm like, look, ESPN got the UFC contract. That's what happened. It's like they're able to push any other sort of fighting sport right off the map, because they're ESPN.
Well, you remember a couple of years ago, HBO did away with their boxing altogether.
Right. And they were one of the biggest pushers too in the teens.
Yeah, after dark. I mean, that was pretty big. Then that ended a couple of years ago or so. So yeah, boxing it's not what it used to be. It's really not as popular. But I know a couple of guys that are really into it now. They're very knowledgeable. They know 10 times more than me. But when it comes to history, I'm up on that. The yesteryear, so to speak.
All right. The name of the podcast is Ringside with Redding, Boxing History from Yesteryear. Frank Redding, thanks for joining us on the showcase today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure to be on your show. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
This has been the Sports History Network Showcase podcast. I'd like to thank our guest, Frank Redding of the Ringside with Redding podcast. The theme song for the SHN Showcase is Quartz by Ani Tech, and it is available through fair use agreement via freemusicarchive.org. SHN Showcase will be back soon with another Sports History Network podcast. Until then, this is Oz Davis saying stay safe and stay historical.
At the Sports History Network, we're all about sports yesteryear, and so we're so pleased to introduce you to Row One, an online memorabilia gallery and shop that brings you sports history to life anywhere. The Row One gallery includes over 5,200 gorgeously reproduced prints of team posters, game program covers, game tickets, advertisements, and more in baseball, pro and college football, pro and college basketball, and more. And any gallery item may be printed in a variety of sizes on wood, metal, canvas, acrylic, or poster paper. And in Row One shop, check out the thousands more of unique items with the retro and historical designs dating back to 1876, including t-shirts, long sleeve shirts, phone cases, mugs, blankets, pillows, towels, and even shower curtains. Go to sportshistorynetwork.com, ROW1, for access to the full Row One catalog and for gallery prints and gift items, plus get a 15% discount off all prints on the Row One Pictorum Gallery with coupon code SHN15. Follow the link on the show notes.